Welcome to Canadian Coffee House Crime. My name is Catherine, and today our case takes us to CFB Trenton, Ontario. Trenton is the largest Department of National Defence base and is the largest Air Force base in Canada. It was established in 1931 on 960 acres and was the largest training centre of the British Commonwealth during the Second World War of the RCAF Central Flying School. Trenton's Cadet Training Centre is one of the oldest cadet training centres in Canada. In 2016, CFB Trenton hosted an air show that saw close to 80,000 visitors. On January 28th, 2010, 27-year-old Jessica Boyd was reported missing to the Ontario Provincial Police after she didn't show up for work. Police showed up at her home in the Tweed, Ontario area and found her not to be at home. Searches of Jessica was conducted with use of helicopters and volunteers for ground searches. Search and rescue from the nearby base of CFB Trenton was authorized to help in this search, recommended and signed off by the commanding officer of the base, Col Russell Williams. Col Russell Williams had a 23-year-long military career. He joined in 1987. He got his wings in 1990, became a captain in 1991. He served in 1992 in Shearwater, Nova Scotia. In 1994, he was in Ottawa. He got his majors. In 1999, he got his Masters of Defense at RNC in 2004. Then he was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel. He was posted to CFB Trenton when in 2009 he was promoted to Colonel and was sworn in as the wing commander. Hundreds of searchers volunteered their time, and after a week of searching, there was no trace of Jessica. Witnesses have reported seeing a silver SUV parked in the field by her house, although Detective Staff Sergeant James Smith, an OPP investigator, and police conducted a search of the area, and it was revealed distinctive tire tracks in the snow only 100 meters north of Jessica's home, along with boot prints. Detective Staff Sergeant Smith was investigating 2 sexual assaults and the body of Corporal Marie-France Comeau, a 37-year-old traffic technician who worked at the base CFB Trenton, had been found dead in her home in November 2009. They were in the same area. He thought that these cases might be connected. They ran the tire tread within the database, and they were able to narrow it down to a few types of vehicles, including Pathfinders. 1 week after Jessica went missing on February 4th, 2010, between the hours of 7 p.m. and 6 a.m., the OPP decided to do a vehicle tire tread search that they masked as a drunk driving search, and they pulled over vehicles and checked every vehicle's tire treads along Highway 37. Col Russell Williams was driving his silver Nissan Pathfinder that day. He usually drove his BMW, but on this day, he drove his Pathfinder. The OPP pulled him over, and without his knowledge, they checked his tire tread. They asked him if he knew anything about the whereabouts of Jessica Lloyd, and he said he couldn't talk to them. He was in a hurry because he had a sick child at home. But before he took off, an officer noted that the tire tread they were looking for was a visible match to his tire tread. After detectives investigated and discovered there was no sick child at home, The base commander of CFB Trenton, Col Russell Williams, was actually put at the top of the list of suspects in the disappearance of Jessica Lloyd and the investigation of Marie Comeau and the 2 other sexual assaults in the area of Tweed. On February 7th, 3 days after the roadside car search, Col Russell Williams is called in by Detective Staff Sergeant Smith to be interrogated. He was at his home at the time. As soon as Russell left his home, the police entered the home and their cottage in Tweed they had since 2004 to search for evidence to the horror of his wife. During the interrogation, Detective Staff Sergeant Jim Smith kept in contact with the police during their search to see if they were coming in with any evidence that he could use with his interrogation. The investigation had started at 3 p.m. and he was immediately shown evidence that they had collected. That evidence was the boot print found at the scene and the tire treads. He was actually wearing the boots to the interrogation that he had worn during the kidnapping of Jessica Lloyd. The interrogation had lasted 10 hours in total. At 7:45 p.m. he had started confessing. During the course of the investigation, with help from the colonel explaining the whereabouts of his hidden stashes, police found pictures of victims, pictures of himself modeling in their underwear, detailed notes of police reports of the crimes he was committing. He kept photos and videos on a computer. He had 1,400 pieces of clothing, mostly lingerie and underwear. They found his camera, a little duffel bag with a black skull cap, a lock-picking manual, boxes and pillowcases stuffed with stolen lingerie. Hidden in his basement ceiling, where he had lived for 19 years, were 2 computer hard drives with his predatory activities recorded over 2 years. Nearly 3,000 photographs of the 2 Tweed assaults and the murders of Marie and Jessica were meticulously compiled and inventoried. Russell Williams, a father of 4, confessed to his crimes. On January 29th at 1 in the morning, Jessica Lloyd was sleeping in her bed. He sexually assaulted her, tied her to a chair, blindfolded her, and posed her naked for pictures. After this, he put her in his 2001 silver Nissan Pathfinder that he had parked in a nearby field, drove over to his cottage in Tweed to continue to assault and photograph her until 8:15 p.m. 17 whole hours after he first broke into her house in his cottage, he cracked her skull with a flashlight and strangled her with a piece of rope. And he videotaped it all. This was January 29th. He left the body in the garage, and then on February 3rd, a couple days later, he brought the body to the woods 3 minutes away from his home. He cooperated with the police and pointed out on a map where he had put her body. The next morning, on February 8th, he led police to a secluded area on Cary Road and Cozy Cove Lane, 3 minutes away from where the colonel lived. He had worked 3 times only with Corporal Marie Comeau on the base. On November 24th, 2009, Russell broke into her home. Marie had to put up a fight, but she had been struck on the head several times with a flashlight. She was sexually assaulted for more than 2 hours, beating her viciously if she resisted, and he recorded it all on his video camera and took photographs while wearing a black mask. He wrapped her face with duct tape and he asphyxiated her. He wrapped her body in a duvet and left it in a bedroom for 30 hours until he was discovered. When she was discovered, he had written a letter of condolences to the father, as he was the commander of CFB Trenton. It was the base where she had worked. He admitted to 2 sexual assaults in the Tweed area. They were walking distance to his house in September 2009. They had both been asleep when Williams had broken in and blindfolded them, assaulted them, and made them pose for photos. The theft of underwear started in 2006, and they all came to the conclusion that the colonel had made 82 fetish-related break-ins of the homes, stealing underwear of girls as young as 9 years old. One woman who was a new mother at a baby nearby reported she woke up to a blow to the head. He had slowly but surely made progressions from break-ins, stealing underwear, to molestations, to sexual assaults, and then murder. He once broke into a 12-year-old's room, stole all her underwear, bathing suits, and a dress. One woman had all her sex toys taken out of her nightstand and left a message on the computer saying, "You want everybody to know what dildos you use?" Police had found semen on a pitcher in a woman's home. He once said to a victim that he was attacking her so he could move on with his life. He was 44 years old when he started breaking into homes and would often break into the same houses over and over. Russell Williams was born March 7th, 1963 in Broomsgrove, Worcestershire, England, to Christine and Cedric Williams. He is the older of 2 boys. His brother is a doctor. When Russell was a child, he moved to the Toronto area and they lived in Scarborough. His parents got divorced, although he went to high school at Birchmount College and Upper Canada College. He delivered the newspaper and played the piano. His mother's divorce did not bother him. There was no parental abandonment, no physical or sexual abuse. He graduated from the University of Toronto in 1986 in economics and political science. At the University of Toronto, he liked to pick locks and hide for hours to scare roommates. He was locked in a room once and he tied his sheets together and climbed out the window. After a bad breakup, he told his friends that he was joining the military to be a pilot. They laughed at him and thought he was trying to be all Tom Cruise, Top Gun, trying to win his girlfriend back. But actually he was described as a shining star in the military and flew VIP aircraft for dignitaries. He flew the Queen Elizabeth, rest in peace, and Prince Philip, also rest in peace, the Governor General of Canada, and the Prime Minister on his flights. He was a decorated military pilot and an instructor. He was married to Mary Elizabeth Harriman in 1991, an associate director of the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada. He is a keen photographer, a fisherman, and a runner. Him and his wife were avid golfers. February 8th, after showing the police the location of Jessica Lloyd, he was remanded into custody and was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of forcible confinement, 2 charges of break and enter with sexual assault, plus 82 charges of break and enter, which he pled guilty to. The day he was charged, he was relieved as base commander, and David Cochran took over as interim commanding officer 11 days later. On his 2nd day in the office, he took Colonel Williams' bio from the D&D website. In April 2010, Williams was placed on suicide watch at the Quinte Detention Center at Nettie, Ontario, and he had tried to kill himself by wedging a toilet paper roll down his throat. On October 18th, 2010, he pled guilty to all charges. There was no trial. And on October 22nd, 4 days later, 2010, Ontario Superior Court Justice Robert F. Scott sentenced him to 2 concurrent terms of life imprisonment, no consideration for approval, for 25 years for parole. The day of his conviction in October 2010, he was stripped of his commission, which his scroll was shredded. He was stripped of his awards from the Governor General. His uniform was burned. His medals were cut into pieces. His military documents, military equipment, and his Pathfinder were all crushed and scrapped and destroyed by the Canadian military. But he was able to keep his $60,000 a year pension that cannot be removed with an act of parliament. His bizarre double life stunned all his family, friends, and everyone who studied him. His wife started divorce proceedings in 2010 after a long, loving marriage and couldn't be finalized until years later because she was involved in civil suits alongside her husband. One of the sexual assault victims, named Jane Doe, and Jessica Lloyd's family both sued Mr. and Mrs. Williams for $1 million each, which was settled in 2014 with financial payments, probably from the $60,000 a year pension that he is still getting. Lori Massicott The second sexual assault victim sued in 2015 to Mr. and Mrs. Williams and the OPP for claiming her statement was false and that the town wasn't informed of a predator. That case is still ongoing. Judge Scott at sentencing had told Mr. Williams that he was a sick, dangerous man who will be remembered as a sadosexual serial killer who lived a charmed life. Therapists questioned this case because he had escalated so quickly within 2 years from just to molestation, to sexual assaults, to murders. And serial killers usually start off at a kind of a young age and they're prone to killing right off the bat. He progressed from B&Es to serial killing within 2 years. What also boggles the mind is that he did this to people he knew. And usually sociopaths don't do that to people who are close to them. They pick random people who are far away from their world as possible. And how he was also to carry on such a double life seems almost impossible. He was turned on by hyper-dominance, sexual coercion, and sexual assault. He should have been unreliable at work, but he was very competent on the job and friendly with staff. He visited a secretary once when she was sick in the hospital. He helped out a fundraiser for a sick cousin of an employee. On the other hand, though, he thought he was invincible and beyond suspicion, and he would have killed again. He was a paraphiliac and egodystonic. He was sent to the Port Cartier Institute in Port Cartier, Quebec. My name is Catherine. Thank you for joining me at Canadian Coffee House Crime. I'll see you in the next case.
Yeah, now they were doing some pretty thorough interviews that night.
Yeah, absolutely. I was glad to see it.
I'm just going to move your gloves here. That's a little microphone. Okay. Make sure there's nice and clear. As you can see here, everything in this room is videotaped and audio taped.
Check.
You ever been interviewed by the police in a room like this before? Or?
I've never